Welcome to this video on, are we really looking at things in coaching that we might think they're the problem, but they're not the problem. And let me just first by giving you a little story. And the story is about going to the doctor, right? You go to the doctor and you say, "Listen, I've got a bad back." And the doctor says, "Okay, let me check it out." And they check out your back and they say, "Yeah, you're right. You do have a bad back. And here's the prescription for your back. It's going to be a heating pad. It's going to be maybe some painkillers and maybe some exercises, right?" And we look at that and we don't question it because that's what's always been told to us, and that's what makes sense logically. And maybe your parents had a bad back and the doctor told them the same thing. So we just take that as the way to treat it. But when we really look at it, maybe it was that your hips weren't aligned. So now, because your hips weren't aligned, it was pushing too much extra stress on your back. So, by the doctor not saying we need to fix your hips because your hips is actually the root of the problem, all you're doing is diagnosing a back, but that's not really the issue. The issue is the hips, but we can't see it. So now let me take you to the MLS final, Seattle against Columbus. And when I look at that game, you had two opening goals by Columbus, both for various reasons, to the back post. I'm not going to say they're identical goals, but they were both created almost for the same reasons. And when I look at those goals, I say to myself, well, the normal coach would probably look at that and say, look, our back four was disorganized, our defensive center mids didn't come back. And what the reality is, how are we going to fix that? And you're looking at two really qualified coaches, obviously both pro licensed diploma coaches and U.S. Soccer Federation licensed pro coaches. And I would assume that Seattle's probably done hundreds of defensive training exercises this year. Their back four, their midfield have worked on shape. Maybe once a week they go through their defensive setup. I remember watching the guy at Besiktas where a 90-minute defensive training session every single week they did that session. And so after the MLS final, if there was another game, you would suspect that the coaches would say, we need to work on our defensive shape. We need to work on this. We got 2 goals scored at the back post. This isn't who we are. We need to fix this. And if that's sounding familiar to you, I take you back to the story of the doctor. The bad back is simply, yes, it's a bad back. And that's what we focused on. But it's really not the back. It's the fact that maybe your hips weren't aligned. So for me, what I would say is maybe it wasn't the back, right? In the MLS, maybe that's not what was wrong. So we might have to look at this through a little bit of a different lens. And we might have to say, really, for me, what is the real problem? And when I look at those 2 goals, I say to myself, they happened for 2 reasons. One was there wasn't any defensive balance. So when that right back went forward in the first one, he went forward and there was no real defensive balance there. And he wasn't aware of why he went forward. He wasn't in a great position to get the ball. Seattle wasn't in a position to give him the ball. So there was no defensive balance there. For me, that's a lack of soccer intelligence, right? And then you could also say, especially on the second goal, the eyes were focused of all 4 defenders were focused on the winger with the ball and focused on the ball. Not one time did anyone take the time to scan over their shoulder to see that there was danger on the back post. Again, a lack of scanning, a lack of soccer intelligence. So if I was to say to you, I actually don't think the defensive training sessions mean much at all. especially sessions where you're just gonna, hey, rotate to the left, the ball's on the wing, everybody shift over and check yourself, are you in good position, and I would even say that perhaps that even constrains the players. Hey, coach said every time the ball's out left with this winger, the whole team has to overshift and make the field small. That could be a constraint in itself. So I would contend that those defensive training sessions really mean nothing or very little. The value of those defensive training sessions are very, very small. Instead, how about taking your center back and playing them at center mid in a 6v6 game once a week to increase the ability to scan? Because now they're in a different position that requires intense scanning. How about you play your right back at center back so he can start to understand, hey, if I get too aggressive going forward in our game model, what does that feel like when I'm the center back with a complete lack of coverage? He needs to see it from that lens as well. So I might take 15 minutes, 10 minutes to show them some video of what happened on the goals, and I might walk through it on the training field. But after that, I might elect not even to do any defensive work and do exactly what I had just told you. So here's an example of maybe some exercises, and we'll take a look at this, that maybe I would do instead of the defensive training. So here we look, you have pressure from all sorts of angles in these sorts of exercises, pressure coming from multiple angles. So if your center back is playing in this, now he has to scan like crazy. Here's a 9v9. Everything is one touch in this exercise. So if we see this is 9v9. Again, everything is one touch. There's actually no positions in this exercise, and there's no offsides. So in this game, everybody has to understand where they are on the field at all times. And here's a classic defensive training exercise. This is one player can cross in and win the ball. This is pressure, cover, balance. Does this really mean anything is my point. How much does this really mean to players when they've done it their whole life? I'm willing to bet that this means very little. So hopefully you've taken something from that. It's looking at the game, and here's what I'll end with, is I think as coaches, we make too many training sessions. Hey, we need to make a training session because the guys didn't move the ball in the back fast enough. We have to make a training session on supporting angles. No, I would say you don't have to do that, because if you have game-based trainings, small area, medium area, large area, everything is game-based, game realistic. You have positional exercises, you have possession exercises that are self-organizing. You put your positional principles of play into all those exercises. I would say, why do you really need to have all these specific topics? I haven't played the game in years, but if you wanted me to take part in a back four training exercise, I already know where to be. I don't need that. That's already part of my soccer intelligence. It's much harder to get intelligence in other areas, like I said, scanning. How do you know that somebody's behind you? How do you know, that you could receive to the back foot? All these types of things takes a long time. Your decision making, how you perceive the game, these things, I just think that we need to look at things in a different way. Hopefully that video was of some use to you. If you didn't see the 2 goals in the MLS final, check them out and you could see what I'm talking about. But I'm a big advocate of, you have to look at things in a different way and don't try to solve the problems in the same way just because everybody says in coaching, oh, what did your team not do well in that last game? And you kind of take out some circumstances and say, hey, this is what they didn't do well. I'm going to make sessions for this. And I'm saying, make sure you know what you're looking at, because just like the lower back wasn't the problem with the doctor. It was bad hip alignment. So if you're going to dissect things and try to recreate things, I would really start to question yourself and say, how come I'm doing this? What was really the root of the problem? And are my trainings based, are they game-based trainings? Are they trainings where players understand how to exploit space and time? These are very, very important things. So I hope you enjoyed the video.